There's this story kind of woven into the history of this show. It's that tragic Greek tale about possessing knowledge but having no agency, truth without belief, a voice without authority. It's always struck me as this powerful metaphor for right now. Like having all the information in the world but still feeling, well, powerless. So today we're really diving deep into that conflict. We're focusing on that core idea we keep coming back to. Your mind becomes its own kingdom. But what does that actually mean? This idea that the mind is like sovereign territory. How does it connect to the books we read, our search for truth, our lives today? Feels huge.
It is huge. And I'm here, as you know, as your voice of synthesis, ready to navigate this with you. That phrase, the mind becomes its own kingdom, it's really much more than just a nice metaphor. It's this assertion of, well, absolute internal sovereignty. It paints a picture of a realm inside you where you're both the ruler and the subject, a place where the lines blur between external reality and your internal landscape, your thoughts, your obsessions, your memories. They carry just as much weight, maybe even more, than the physical world outside.
Okay, wow. That shifts things immediately, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We're not talking about the mind as just like a passive computer input-output. You're saying it's more like a generative space, almost geological. If thoughts are the active forces, how do they actually shape that internal kingdom?
Well, the key is understanding that these internal processes are active. They're not just reacting to stuff. What's really fascinating is how the very act of thinking changes the thinker. Take memory, for instance. Memories aren't like these fixed files you just pull up. No. Every single time you recall something, you're editing it. You're resaving it with slight changes.
Wait, hold on. So every time I think about, say, high school, I'm actively rewriting it. Is the monarch of my mind like constantly censoring its own history to make things look better?
In a way, yeah. It's self-governance, right? And it goes beyond just memory. Think about fantasies, obsessions. They don't just stay put in your daydreams. They actually bleed out. They start to color your perception, change how you make decisions. That one idea, that driving obsession, it can be like a colonizing force.
So it's not just sitting there.
No, it actively restructures the whole political and physical geography of your mental kingdom. It can remake everything around itself.
Right. So the mind stops just processing experience and starts actively building worlds. We've all felt that, haven't we? Where a single idea, maybe a fear or a goal or even paranoia just starts to grow, to metastasize until it becomes this entire personal cosmology. Suddenly your mental kingdom has its own laws, its own physics, all built on that one powerful thing.
And that's why its generative nature is so critical. The mind creates these alternative realities that can feel just as solid, just as real as the physical world. And the more energy you pour into building that internal reality, the more it dictates how you act out there in the external world. That's the real power and maybe the danger of having your own kingdom.
Okay, this is where it gets really crucial, I think. Connecting that immense power, that world-building capacity to right now. To the modern context. We're living in this age of insane hyperconnectivity, right? Information overload, constant bombardment from notifications, news cycles, social media. It never stops. So if the mind is a kingdom, what happens when the walls are always under siege?
That's the critical paradox, the duality of the modern kingdom. It's become both a refuge and a prison. On one hand, yes, it feels like the ultimate refuge. It's the one space where supposedly we have complete control. We can retreat from all the noise, rule our inner world.
But that hyperconnectivity you mentioned means that sovereignty is just incredibly fragile, doesn't it?
Exactly. Precisely. Because it's also the space that's most vulnerable to invasion now. We think we're safe inside our own heads, but the truth is, the mind is the new front line. It's information warfare territory. It's so susceptible to being pollinized by algorithms telling you who you are, by manufactured online drama sucking up your attention, by these relentless narratives fed to us constantly.
Wow. So we think we're the monarch, chilling in our throne room, but the castle walls are porous. Every notification ping, every trending hashtag is slipping through the cracks. If the external world just needs to colonize our mental space, I mean, is true internal sovereignty even possible anymore? Or are we already just, subjects in these huge global digital empires?
Well, the battle for sovereignty is real, and the currency is attention. The vulnerability, the real danger, lies in the fact that the very architecture of your kingdom, your worldview, your sense of self, it can be hacked. It can be rewired without any physical force. The outside world doesn't need to storm the gates if it can just convince your citizens your own thoughts to defect. The key to keeping it a refuge is, well, it's recognizing the invaders. It's setting up your own internal checkpoints.
Okay, so if our minds are under siege, where do we find the maps? Where are the battle reports? Which kinds of contemporary books are doing the best job exploring this internal conflict right now?
Oh, contemporary literature is absolutely fascinated with this idea of interior sovereignty and how fragile it is.
Yeah.
We've actually identified several distinct categories where this mind as kingdom idea is really central, where authors are mapping the architecture of consciousness under stress.
Well, let's map them out. Where do we start? Maybe the most obvious one? Psychological thrillers.
Hmm.
That feels like the treacherous geography category.
Exactly. Perfect place to start. Authors like Gillian Flynn, Paula Hawkins, Ruth Ware, they build entire stories where the protagonist's mind isn't just the window we look through, it is the territory we have to explore. You often get these unreliable narrators who are basically monarchs ruling over a crumbling, maybe self-deluded kingdom. The whole tension for you, the reader, comes from trying to navigate this mental space without any guarantee of objective truth.
Yeah, you're completely lost in someone else's head, right?
Yeah.
Trying desperately to figure out what's real, what's paranoia, what's the actual capital city versus some forgotten outpost of delusion.
Then you've got speculative fiction. This is where the metaphor often becomes much more literal. Think about N.K. Jemisin's work, or maybe narratives influenced by films like Inception. Mental spaces become actual, tangible places. They become kingdoms with their own physics, their own politics, places you can enter, conquer, or defend. The battles aren't fought with swords. They're fought with dreams, with competing ideas of the self.
Okay, and moving into just literary fiction, here we see a different kind of mapping,
Yeah.
right? Exploring things like trauma, mental illness, neurodivergence.
Absolutely. Here, characters often exist in mental kingdoms that just operate by completely different rules than, consensus reality. Think of someone like Atessa Moshfegh and her narrators. Their internal worlds are so incredibly detailed, so fully realized and internally consistent that the external world almost becomes secondary. It's like an annoying distraction. That internal kingdom might be intricate, maybe labyrinthine, maybe even actively hostile to the person living in it. And for you to understand the character, you have to accept that alternative logic.
Right. Okay, next up, dark academia and campus novels. This category feels like it's about secession, maybe, pulling away.
That's a great way to put it. Secession. Books like Donna Tartt's The Secret History or Mona Awad's Bunny. You see characters get so deeply immersed in these really insular communities, these intellectual rabbit holes, that they essentially construct their own kingdoms. They have their own rigid hierarchies, their own value systems, sometimes even their own private languages. They effectively just secede from ordinary life.
Building walls.
Exactly. It's a political act, declaring sovereignty. They build these metaphorical walls to keep out the chaos, the messiness, the banality of the external world. They trade physical freedom for this sense of intellectual or maybe communal control. It's radical, often dangerous, but it's an attempt to create this perfectly controlled mental space shared by just a few.
Okay. Then there's autofiction and fragmented narratives. For anyone listening, autofiction is kind of where the author uses themselves, their own thoughts and life as the main subject, right? Consciousness itself is the landscape.
Precisely. In books like Jenny Offill's Depth of Speculation or Ocean Wombs on Earth Were Briefly Gorgeous, the author's mind is the explicit subject. Consciousness itself is the terrain being mapped. The focus is intensely on the kingdom of thought, of reflection, of language itself, rather than, say, external plot points happening in a line. The plot is the thinking process.
Got it. And finally, fantasy. You mentioned world building as a cognitive act earlier. How does that play out here?
Oh, the best fantasy, I think, uses its world building as this incredible exteriorization of mental states. Look at Susanna Clarke's Piranesi or Erin Morgenstern's The Starless Sea. These incredibly elaborate fictional worlds. They're really manifestations of internal states. They allow the author to make the strange kingdoms the characters navigate simultaneously physical places and psychological territories.
So if a place in the book feels dangerous or confusing,
it usually reflects the internal state of the character, or maybe the whole culture. The setting becomes the soul, made visible.
that makes perfect sense, setting itself. But, as modern as all these genres feel in tackling this, the core idea, internal sovereignty, it's ancient, isn't it? Long before this modern mental siege.
Yeah.
Where did this concept of the mind as its own kingdom really start?
Oh, absolutely. It's deeply rooted in centuries of philosophy and literature, long before tweets and notifications existed. Probably the most famous, the most defining assertion of this power comes from John Milton. Paradise Lost, 1667.
Ah, Milton, of course. The great declaration of internal defiance, coming from literature's most defiant character, no less.
Exactly. It's Satan, fallen, who delivers that incredible line. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. And that's not just, poetic flourish. It's this ultimate claim that external circumstances, even being literally damned to hell, are secondary. The mind holds the sovereign power to reshape its reality through perception, through sheer internal will.
That's such a challenging idea, though, because it puts all the responsibility inward. And Shakespeare was wrestling with this even earlier, wasn't he, in Hamlet? That line, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Yes. And of course, that iconic moment where Hamlet, physically trapped in Elsinore, calls it a prison, yet still counts himself a king of infinite space. Both Milton and Shakespeare are affirming that the true realm you govern is internal. It doesn't matter about physical walls or political situations.
And you see those echoes carrying forward right through the Romantic poets who really champion the mind as this huge, creative, world-building force, a space just as significant as any mountain range or ocean. And it's not just a Western idea either.
Not at all. It connects beautifully with Eastern traditions too,
Yeah.
especially Stoicism and Buddhist thought. The core principle is basically identical. You don't control what happens outside you, but you can control your internal response. Your real power lies in ruling the kingdom of your own mind. That is the ultimate act of sovereignty.
Okay, so if we tie all this together now, thinking about the big picture, it completely changes the role of the modern reader, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If these books are maps of internal kingdoms, then we aren't just passive tourists. We're explorers.
We are active explorers, absolutely. We're being asked to temporarily surrender our own mental sovereignty to enter someone else's, to learn the language, the customs, the architecture, the dangers of their unique internal space. We're reading not just for plot, but to understand the very mechanics of consciousness under different forms of governance, different pressures.
And that feels particularly profound when we think about it through the lens of neurodivergence, which, as you said, modern literature is exploring much more now.
Yes, I think that's perhaps the most powerful modern application of this whole mind is kingdom idea. It's the growing recognition that everyone's subjective experience is genuinely different. Every single mind is its own unique kingdom, with its own complex, often unconventional architecture. So when authors map these unique mental terrains, they're offering us a way in, a way to understand worlds built on totally different sets of internal rules.
So the point isn't to judge, right? When modern books do this well, they aren't asking us if these mental spaces are normal or correct. They're just asking us to observe, to respect the unique sovereignty of that internal architecture, and maybe, just maybe, recognize something of our own hidden rooms, our own internal battles in the process. It's observation, not judgment. That's the empathy.
And that deep, empathetic observation, it's transformative. Honestly, setting aside time for deep reading, especially of these kinds of complex literary blueprints, it's one of the most powerful defenses we have against that external colonization we talked about. It strengthens your own walls because you see how other kingdoms are built, how they're maintained, how they sometimes fall.
Okay, so the ultimate takeaway here, you listening, is that the books we read, they're like reconnaissance reports. By studying these elaborate, unique, sometimes treacherous kingdoms of others in literature, you gain the blueprints. You gain the knowledge to understand and maybe more importantly to reign over your own mental kingdom more effectively.
That is the ultimate sovereignty, the one worth fighting for in a world that's constantly trying to dictate your internal reality.
So as you head back out now into the noise, into the external world, maybe just ask yourself, who is truly reigning over your infinite space?